Hi all and welcome back to another episode of the ICAS Energy Foresight podcast. It's a special episode with a special guest, Gregor Pett, Chief Analyst at Uniper. Welcome, Gregor.
Hello, hi Matteo.
Welcome to our podcast. It's an honor to have you here, and I hope that you can help me understand and help us, our listeners understand what's going on in the energy market. We've got to the end of the winter. It's been a tough winter, tougher than previous ones. And there is a whole spring and summer, or what we call the shoulder season for the gas market ahead of us, with a lot of interesting dynamics that I'm keen to talk with you about. But probably the usual starting point for our listeners is to tell us a bit more about you, your role, and Uniper, even though I'm pretty sure that a lot of our listeners know a lot about your company.
Yeah. Thanks, Matteo. I mean, Uniper is a big power producer in Europe mainly. We have a significant amount of hydro production in the Nordic region in particular, but also in Germany. We also operate gas-fired power plants and coal-fired plants. This is where most of the people know us. We are also one of the bigger gas midstream companies with a global footprint. We trade LNG globally, also between Asia, Europe, and the US. We also are an off-taker of US LNG. And also we have offices in Houston, in Singapore, and in Dubai. So this is probably the facts that are less known about us. And we are increasingly engaging into green commodities, green fuels, green ammonia, green hydrogen, etc. So quite a broad spectrum of activities.
And as I said, the perfect guest to help us move through the different energy markets, from gas to power and touch about the new green ones, but probably. Gregor, if you don't mind, I would start from what's still the hot topic on the market, which is the gas side. The European gas market is still at very high level. We've come to the end of winter with storage levels around 33-35%, depending on different markets, different countries, and the summer-winter spread is not yet where it should be in terms of providing the right incentive for companies, for market players to actually start filling storage sites ahead of the next winter. And probably the uncertainty from the policy angle is still quite high, because the Commission came up with a proposal a few weeks ago. Council responded with another proposal, but yeah, that probably it plays into the political landscape, which is very fluid at the moment. But just to look at the next few months, and can you help us understand what do you see as the main dynamics, and how is this gonna play out in your view ahead of the next winter, which is also supposed to be quite critical as for the European gas market?
Yeah, you are right. I mean, the gas prices as we speak are more than twice the level we had in early 2021, before the crisis started. Yeah, that was 1 year ahead of the war in Ukraine actually starting. So still we have more than twice the level, but it's of course far below the high levels we've seen with 300 euros, etc. In the meantime, over some weeks, and when storage filling was done at any cost. So we are far from those levels. That's a good message. But still, we have storage regulation in place that requires us to fill storage up to, in our case here in Germany, 90% as of 1st of November. And as you rightly said, the EU Commission has just proposed to extend that legislation, which is causing some problems, because the expectation is that storage has to be filled at any cost during summer, and this is why the prices are so high. So everybody is basically thinking that will happen, and that's not helpful because the economic storage filling, normally you would expect gas in summer to be cheaper than in winter, and this is actually not what happens at the moment. So what we would argue is that we should be careful with all these rules in place, and actually the targets should be a bit more flexible to allow market-based filling of the storage, and not artificially making the gas expensive in summer. So we think these targets should be a bit relaxed. That would actually help. Then, of course, the supply needs to be there and to get that gas. But the good news is we are getting significant gas as we speak. Norway is the most important supplier of gas to Europe, so we are quite happy with these deliveries. But also LNG is quite successful, so we are getting record levels of LNG imports into Europe as we speak. There's an opportunity because Chinese buyers are not taking as much LNG as they previously have done. So there's a lot of opportunity for Europe, which we are taking, and also new US liquefaction projects which have come online in the meantime, and these cargoes are also to a large extent going to Europe. So we are quite optimistic that Europe can manage with this situation.
Yeah, that is absolutely true, and we could open the other window, the other door into the speculation around Russian gas coming back at some point, or up to the point that that there are discussions around reopening Nord Stream. But I think that would take us on a different tangent. I think I would use what you just said about obviously summer prices being higher than the winter prices, and the lack of flexibility effectively, which the storage regulation introduces in the gas market, to also look at the interplay between gas and power. Is high gas prices are still reflected into the power price, and we can see that especially when we look at the spark spreads, so the margins that power plants can actually make by selling electricity now forward. And we can see that both actually spark and gas spreads for gas and coal margins are negative. So there is not a real incentive for utilities like Uniper to look at the curve and lock in future sales, or at least it is what is called the hedging paradigm. If we want to, it is changing, or it has changed. Can you help us understand a bit more how you guys are dealing with it? What's the current landscape for you to actually make up for negative spreads on the curve?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have to distinguish between coal and gas, really. So in the case of coal, in most countries in Europe, in Western Europe, coal is on the path to being phased out. So many of these plants are not new. They're quite old. There are some exceptions, like we have 2 plants that are relatively new, but a lot of these plants are old, and they are sometimes even in reserve. So which means they stand there to be used in reserve situations. And this is a completely different situation than the gas fleet, where we think that gas is required in the future, and the gas plants have a role to play for security of supply. So when it comes to coal, it's apparently difficult then to economically operate them. Yeah, so there might be situations where this works, but also, as you are aware, that the relatively old coal plants are not as easily ramped up or down, and they are less flexible in general. And you have to have the coal on stock, etc. And the logistics behind that make this very complex. On the gas side, if you look at the spreads, I mean, for years, etc., if you look at the average of the year, clearly it's not, it's below zero, it's negative. You have to rely on these plants operating in the hours or days of need. So, and if you look at that, then you will see that, of course, there are a shorter period of times, not years, not months, where you can successfully operate these plants. So the good news is they have a place in the merit order. The not so good news is it's not enough to economically operate them and to invest in them. We need investments in gas plants, and governments, and also the German government in particular. You know that there's negotiations about a new coalition in place as we speak, and they recognize this fact, and they are planning to do something about it. We need it urgently, and it needs mechanisms like tender mechanisms where you get additional funding for these plants, because the energy-only market will not be enough then to secure economic operations of these plants. So, but we are optimistic. Like similar in the UK, it's happening as we speak. Other countries, Belgium, France, have also introduced capacity markets. So we are optimistic it will happen, but it needs to happen quickly.
Thanks a lot. That is super interesting, and we are observing that in obviously reflected in the power market, and you see that there is difference between how the forward curve behaves, and then what we see reflected on the day-ahead market, and obviously closer to real-time markets as the intraday or the balancing one, where obviously conventional power plants and programmable power plants are needed, and they contribute to stabilize the grid and meet demand at a point in time. I have a follow-up questions on that, because capacity markets are emerging all across Europe. I wouldn't just probably say Europe, but let's remain in Europe. It is an essential tool to actually extend the lifetime of existing assets and build new capacity in, because there is not a natural incentive right now for players like Uniper to build more capacity. At the same time, we are seeing that not fighting, but competing against the need for more renewables to reduce our energy dependency, as both the Draghi report and the latest publications coming from the Commission they're referred to. Will one key objective that all governments have is to reduce power prices, up to the point that that there are different options being discussed, proposed, of how you try to make the most of renewables, which are cheaper when we look just at the power generation, or the prices that they should have, looking at the levelized cost of electricity, against gas plants that obviously they are somehow affected by gas prices, right, by definition. What is your view on this debate, and how do you see marginal pricing, which is effectively what is being discussed at the moment, going forward? Is it up for question?
Yeah, I mean, we have to differentiate. I mean, the good news is that renewables have been built out quite well, and they've become much cheaper in recent years, in particular solar PV. So that's the good news. So we've seen I mean, if you take Germany as example, a really surge in photovoltaic power capacity installed, and also power production. As you are probably aware that Germany has 60% electricity production from renewable sources ahead last year. So that's the good news. But of course, it's not only about the marginal price, so which is almost zero when you talk about renewables, of course. So this is what we are looking at. So this is good. But then, of course, you have to finance somehow the build out. That's one thing. And in the case of solar PV, you also have the grid to absorb these volumes that they produce. So we have in many hours, and an increasingly number of hours, we have prices below zero. This is where the feed of renewable energy is higher than the demand. So, and this is of course increasing, and it increases the stress of the system. So we need the grid build out to cope with this fluctuation of the energy, and we need, of course, then also plants that can balance that, because the load is not always following the same pattern as the production. So we need those dispatchable plants, and you need to add those costs to the overall costs of the system. So we need to look at the system in its entirety. And then the amount of additional renewables the system can cope with depends on the grid, on the situation in the grid, and also on these plants you then need to balance the system. So we need to see all of that together. And I still think that combination between gas-fired plants in particular, at some point hopefully fired by hydrogen, and renewables, I still think that's a winning combination, but we can't blind ourselves as to the overall cost of the system.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Gregor. I would just ask you very last comment. Are you bearish or bullish power?
So in my profession, you always say it depends, yeah, on the driver. So, and of course, as you said, gas is very often setting the price in some hours. So a lot depends on the gas price, and will it stay where it is? Will it be higher? Will it be lower? Overall, we need those additional plants. We need there's a capacity gap coming up in European countries, and again, Germany is an example, but it's not the only one. That's the result of phasing out of coal plants. That's the result of phasing out of nuclear plants. Luckily, in our neighbor country, France, it has been the availability of nuclear has been relatively stable recently. So there were some problems in recent years. So all of this put together, we really need to take care that the system is balanced and that the additional capacity is brought online. If that doesn't take place, we will see, in certain hours, very high prices. So we don't want that. So we need that capacity built out to the system. So I'm optimistic we will see prices then that make the optimization of the system worth its while. But we need to do our homework.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think we the new deck, and it's a comment that I was making with another market player a few weeks ago. We got used to have a European energy market oversupplied. Now the situation has changed, and obviously it's tighter for across the whole spectrum. So there is a need to build more and of everything, and renewables, and that will contribute to that. But yeah, it is it is effectively an energy transition, right? It doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, and you have to be aware of the overall economic situation as well. So what the economy does is important then also for electricity consumption for industrial sites. Yeah, so that plays an important role as well.
So super important. Thanks a lot again, Gregor. It was a pleasure. It was super interesting. And as always, if you want to know more about Energy Foresight, please visit our website, icis.com, or reach out. And to the next time.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It was great fun. Thank you.
Thank you.